Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 34, Astrology. First off, I just wanted to take a moment to say that it really is an honor and a privilege to make these videos for you and to get to create with all of you. As I was recently telling someone, right, that is my privilege. And I appreciate it so much. I receive messages from people that are so kind and insightful and humbling. And before anything else today, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that every thank you I'm sent is my moment of shared gratitude and appreciation for you as well. So now that the important stuff's out of the way, in high Enochian magic, there are some areas of applied skill that are addressed very early on. You've probably already noticed some of the ones I've been hinting, explaining, or mentioning that I've mentioned in earlier videos. Breathing and simple initiate meditative techniques, the contemplation of the soul story of the tarot, the study of the Kabbalic tree of life, that entire realm of the arcane, beginning banishing, sanctifying, and sigil work in generation, chakra visualization and balancing work, novice ceremonial ritual and incantation, such as circle casting and the vibration of God names that I've gone over, simple conditional and environmental awareness, focus, and honing training, such as knowing the elements, corresponding compass points, and being able to align with the sun direction automatically, even if you're blindfolded in a dark room, right? Because if you go through and you practice occultism, you're going to come into that skill set. Silence and egoic dissolution groundwork. That's something that I've started going over. Some simple geomancy and scrying. Depolarization and energetic focus practices, which I keep going on and on about. Hermetic principles, which I've made their own playlist for. And there's even more, just at the initiate, just at the neophyte levels of beginning occultism. But one thing that I haven't touched on at all yet, other than to say that it's a huge field, is the art of astrology, which is such a massive field that it deserves its own playlist of videos. So as soon as I manage to get through creation of all the tarot card videos, astrology will definitely be next on my list for some very in-depth detail that you can easily refer to. I'll go through the attributes, right? The aspects of all the planetary powers in their own short little videos. For now, I'll say that any ceremonial magician who spent time in their craft is going to have some very decent background in astrology. Remember the Hermetic principle of rhythm, specifically the law of rhythm? I'll test my occult trained memory. Right? Everything flows. In and out, everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This is the Kabbalion. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, to and fro, an inflow and an outflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity. This is the Kabbalion. So yeah, that's the principle of rhythm, if I got it mostly correct from memory. And it applies to the movement of all things. And rhythm will pull you in, draw you in, and if you don't know how to use it, it will use you every time. Even a simple thing like a chant or a trance-like state brought on by a rhythmic repetition of words, right? You can get caught up in it. So even things like planets are going to be under the rule of rhythm. They're going to fall into accordance with that principle. So the great art of astrology, although like so many other magic practices, is all too often corrupted into interpretations of base, meaningless nonsense, right? Like you have those irrational daily horoscopes papers used to print and called zodiac or astrological. It's just junk. Regardless, the great art of astrology has a great deal to actually do with rhythm. The movement of the planets and the stars are the adept's wristwatch, if you will. A proficient magi can understand his place in an environment or situation in relation to others, right? A proficient male or female ceremonial magician has a very real awareness of their own position and perspective, and how it isn't necessarily the position and perspective of those around them, right? So a proficient magi can also understand his or her place on the planet and the tidal forces around him or herself by use of the movement of the heavens, which, yes, that's just science, right? Every traveler throughout history did the same to some greater or lesser degree or another, or they got lost. The North Star isn't called the North Star because we don't use it for interpreted directional purposes. Astrology is the occult practitioner's energetic GPS system. In Wicca, you can see how Wiccans, they tend to focus mostly on the moon within their tradition, most publicly at even the lowest neophyte grades of their magical training or apprenticeships, right? Everyone in Wicca knows about the study and harmonies of the moon. That is the lunar cycles and its aspects and influences. Moon day, Monday. The moon is rhythmic. It waxes and wanes. There is a drawing effect, right? A magnetic pulling effect and a repelling effect. The tides themselves, the ocean's waters, are ruled in this way by this planetary lunar force. That's simple science. Well, maybe not simple science. I always had a hard time remembering which way neap tides were going, but it is science. So if a Wiccan wishes to do a spell to gain or receive something in magic in some way, then that spell work will be done in coordination with a waxing moon. That is a receptive moon, a moon headed towards fullness, growth. And if a Wiccan wants to dissolve or get rid of something, then that sort of a spell is going to be done during the waning moon, a moon that is going away, disappearing, because that is where that tradition places its focus. See? Rhythm in accordance with everything. Solar mystery traditions like Christianity tend to focus on the sun, gathering instead for dawn masses on the sun's day, Sunday, when the light of the world briefly leaves and then there's only darkness of the cave until that light rises forth again, reborn, an ascendant, a dawning, just like the sun's dawn, the sun's rhythm. There are cycles there. See them? All the planets also have them, as do stars. And Hermetic Enochian ceremonial magicians, such as myself, well, we delve into all of it, really. The sun, the moon, every planet, major constellations, Draconis, major and minor, whether or not you're on the cusp, all have rhythm, all have wisdom to express. Occultists understand better than most that because of the principle of rhythm, there are good times and not good times. There will be times of, say, very good health, for instance, and times when the body will be weaker or need to heal. There will be times of great resource where all is provided, and times of less resource where much must be accomplished with little. Fat times and lean times is another way of expressing it. These are just simple facts of the dynamics of rhythm applied to life while living in a physical body on this plane of existence, whether or not you believe in anything else. If you get a new car on Tuesday, chances are that you aren't also going to get a new car on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday as well. And if you received a new car on Tuesday, you probably didn't get it on the Monday before or the Sunday before. See, there's a day when you got the new car, and then there were days preceding it and after it when you didn't. That doesn't make those other days less worthy days in their own ways. It's just that those were days that you didn't get a car. But there is a rhythm there, right? In the specific instance of receiving that resource, you have a swing of the pendulum, an uptick on receiving that car, followed by some downbeats on the days when you already have it now, so you aren't receiving it. This is rhythm, one example of it. Maybe not the best example, but in this example, it's a beneficial resource rhythm that's being noted at a specific temporal time. In the same way, there are times when it's good to grow. And then there's times when it's less good to grow. Anything. You don't plant tomatoes in the snow because they grow well in the warm, wet spring. Right? So there is a cycle, a downswing of the pendulum. Because winter isn't the most auspicious time for the growing of tomatoes. Winter is a good time for the soil to be allowed to rest and heal, right? So those minerals and bacteria can rebalance, for the snow to then later on melt in its own cyclical pattern, completing that cycle again. So usually when it isn't a good time for something, it's usually a good time for something else. So this idea that there's good and bad, that's not quite how it works. It's just there are times when something is happening and times when something else is happening. And sometimes that something else can be difficult to see or understand, so we see it as the bad or the negation effect, right? What I'm getting at is that astrology tells you what are the good times to be planting your tomatoes. And what are the bad times to be trying to plant tomatoes in the snow because it won't work and you're supposed to be letting the soil do what it's supposed to do. But not just in the application of soil and growing tomatoes. Astrology is how the occultist can look more directly into rhythm and its information so that that information can be put to best effect. It's always better, or at least far less, of an exhausting struggle to go with the tide rather than blindly trying to force your way through it or against it. And the only way to do that is to be able to see it. Better to ride those peaks and valleys of the ebb and flow like a seagull, right? Or a storm bird calmly sitting on the surface of the ocean. You're being carried up and then down peacefully by the waves. Better to be that than to be the person fighting every natural current, struggling against each wave that's coming that you can't see, spluttering and splashing and perhaps barely surviving. Being beaten down by each new crest of a wave and its crash, instead of allowing those waves to smoothly lift and then lower you back down again, right? That's what astrology gives the magician, the ability to be that very calm, resting seagull, just riding those waves. It's a map of the currents to ride, instead of being tossed around by them. The occultist makes use of and rules the planets, instead of being ruled by them. A few well-earned years of ceremonial magic under your belt, and an adept will know where the planets are and what they're doing at any given time, and how best to make use of them, and the frequency with which specific attributes will present themselves. Rhythm exists whether or not you understand it or control it. If you aren't using it, then you are being carried by it. And no, I don't mean your sign or horoscope or whatever most non-occultists think their zodiac or horoscope is, which is usually some bizarre single sign rulership, usually in a sun house that doesn't really mean anything, right? It's usually just the single zodiac of their sun's house in alignment maybe with whatever the heck flawed chart that someone happened to pick out that day based on a 24-hour period of their birthday instead of their actual moment of birth and, where the sun was on the horizon. Just a quick side note here. If you're, say, a Sagittarius, you aren't actually just a Sagittarius. That's just one aspect of your astrological chart, right? It's one planet's rule within one house. Likely your solar correspondence. It's likely the sun rulership. And it probably isn't doing you much good to know even that, right? That you're a Sagittarius because sun in Sagittarius's house. Because that information, just that information, is best applied given its entire dependence on all the other signs and their aspects and attributes of all your other planetary houses. So even if you do know that you are a Sagittarius, say, because that's your sun correspondence, you still can't make much use of that because you don't know what's going on with everything else. So it isn't going to define you well, and you aren't going to be able to work with it. Could you imagine if Alexander the Great had been just walking around thinking that he was just a Cancer, that he was just one zodiac sign? There's no way he would have accomplished what he did. Or if Axel thought he was only a Taurus, right? That great Aztec leader, right? You can't rule the planets if you're confused into thinking that you are ruled by just one of them or one star alignment for some reason. It's such nonsense. And no, I'm not a Sagittarius or a Cancer or a Leo. I'm not going to tell you what I am. But if you don't already know this, and you might, but if you don't already, please just know that one date spitting out one sign at you isn't what the zodiac actually are. And it's not their mystery intention of use. Much like the tarot, right? The tarot isn't some fortune teller's tool to tell you if your next lover is going to have dark hair. That's a corruption. It's a foolish misuse. Usually a charlatan's hat trick of what the tarot truly is. And that's usually because the person using it that way doesn't know any better. They don't know the true purpose, intention, and power behind the cards because they themselves are not initiated or learned in what the tarot actually is, right? They just have this very public, false perception of it, and that's what they've learned. Those who use these occult tools like the tarot or astrology so wrongly or ineffectively, that's actually one of the quickest and easiest ways for an authentic occultist to spot a fake. If we see someone giving a tarot reading saying, oh, you're going to make money tomorrow, we know that that person doesn't know what the tarot is. And if we see someone saying, oh, you're a Leo, that means you're aggressive, we know immediately that they don't understand what the zodiac is, right? Whether or not they know themselves to be passing along misinformation, whether or not it's being done on purpose, it's still misinformation, right? Because yes, some people are just taken in by what they've been mistaught, and then they pass that confusion along, but that doesn't make it any less misinformed. Anyway, this YouTube podcast is already too long today. I kind of went off on a tangent there. So take the time as I begin to introduce astrology, to consider the law of rhythm, the ebb and the flow, and how it applies to you and everything around you. And I'll return to more on astrology next time in a part 2. Until next time.